Kia ora tātou, welcome to our Hawke's Bay Regional Council meeting today. We've already opened our workshop with the karakia, so we'll just carry that wairua into this council meeting. A few housekeeping rules. This meeting will be live streamed when someone gets here to start it. And it will go on our Facebook page and later viewing on YouTube. In the event of an earthquake, drop, cover and hold. If the shaking is long or strong, when the shaking subsides, leave the building through the nearest exit and proceed immediately towards Napier Hill along Dalton Street to Tippin Park, continuing up the steps to Cameron Road. In the event of evacuation, if an emergency alarm sounds, immediately evacuate the building through the nearest exit and proceed to the assembly area on the grass at the corner of Dalton and Voltaire Streets. Emergency exits are clearly signposted. Toilets are located down the hallway outside the chamber entrance. Can I please call for any apologies for today's meeting? Possibly Councillor Curtin, you might be leaving early.
Yes.
Thank you. Any other early leavers? No.
Depends on the
Any conflict of interest declarations in today's meeting?
Yeah, in regards to the science charges, contribute considerable consent holder in this particular area. So I just like to
Thank you,
bring that
Councillor
to your attention.
Thank you. Councillor Hawke.
Just if we go over 3:30, Madam Chair.
Oh, thank you. Leaving 3:30. Any other conflicts? None. So we're going to change call for minor items and call for other items not on the agenda. I am calling for those. Councillor Roadley, would you like an agenda item for later? No, there are none. Councillor Foley?
Yes, please, Chair. Can I give an update on Hawke's Bay Future Farming Trust?
Yep. Any other items not on the agenda? Yes.
Chair, just seek clarification. We're all highly aware that we received the CDM report on.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, so
I was going to cover that in notices.
Yeah, so you're going to cover that?
Yes,
fantastic.
thank you.
Thank you.
I'm jumping around a bit. And then I will go to the confirmation of minutes from the 13th of March. Are there any changes to be made? Notices. Yes, I don't think it matters too much.
Really?
No. Okay. So any alterations to those minutes? No. Can I have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Van Beek and Councillor Harding. All those agree say aye.
Aye.
Those against? Carried. And before we get into the substantial matters, I'd just like to provide the notice that on Monday, the Hawke's Bay CDM Joint Committee, made up of myself, the mayors, Baden Barber and Leon Symes, Te Kaha Hawaikirangi joined us also as a PSGE member. We endorsed and accepted the full report and recommendations from Mr. Bush and his review panel. That was a review done independently to assess, to seek feedback from our community, stakeholders, staff, emergency responders for the civil defence and emergency operational response. So you would have seen a lot of media coverage about the review and the recommendations. I would like us to be able to accept those, to also discuss further, even though they have already been accepted by the Joint Committee. But it is a time for us to have overview of that at the next possible council meeting. So if everyone's in agreement of that, we will make sure it's on our next agenda.
Yeah.
Moving into our decision items, we have number 5, report and recommendations from the Risk and Audit Committee. Team, we have substantial decision items today, so what I might do is have that taken as read. And if there are any major questions from that committee meeting, Susie will be able to answer if we have any. Do we have any questions? Councillor Harding.
Chair, not a question, but just to offer that if you'd like me to pass any observations as the chair of that committee standing in for Stephen Malloy on the day, I'm happy to do so. Would be very brief, but up to you.
Sure, some key points would be great.
Yeah. Look, and I think the headlines are that we have a new risk management policy, risk maturity refresh, and a system of one-page management plans for risk, which is being deeply and widely embedded through the organisation. That's progressing very well, and it provides a really good tool for the Risk and Audit Committee to then drill down into risk around individual activities. So it's linked. So the ELT members are taking full responsibility for it. The risk ownership is being devolved through management. So the system is being embedded, and the Risk and Audit Committee will be able to test it as we go along. As part of that, I just want to draw your attention to paragraph 4.6. Now, this system does rely on regular risk sentiment surveys of both the executive leadership team and we as councillors. And I would just encourage we councillors to contribute fully and regularly to our surveys so that we can balance out our risk perceptions. It's a key part of the system that we get this ongoing feedback from councillors as to their perceptions of risk, and then we, as part of the process, we compare them against the risk perceptions of the executive leadership team, and it gives us additional information to manage differences and manage areas of particular concern. So that's enough for me. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Councillor Harding, and for the reminder to keep engaged with those surveys. Thank you. Are there any questions? There are none. So we have 3 recommendations from this committee meeting, including approves the risk management policy. And we have a mover, Councillor Harding, and a seconder, Councillor McIntosh. Would you like to speak further, either of you? All those who agree say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Thank you. Recommendations from the Corporate and Strategic Committee, which we had many. We have many recommendations there. I will take that as read. Are there any further questions? There are none. Can I please have a mover, Councillor Harding, and a seconder, Councillor Sears?
Point of clarification, Madam Chair.
Yes.
You're including recommendations 8 and 9 to do with the transit school bus service.
Yes.
What was the question, Councillor Good?
We're moving all
the
9.
recommendations include the arrangements for transit school bus service.
Yes. 1 to 9. The full 9 recommendations.
So my question is, what does the second part of that sentence mean? Which point?
The notes part.
Well, transit bus, it says notes that this decision does not commit to funding beyond the current financial year, and any funding beyond that will be considered through the 24/7 long-term plan. How is that happening? What does that mean? Still on the table, or is it off the table? What's the story?
Through you, Chair, I think councillors wanted this to be added into the process for you to consider during your long-term plan workshops. And if you chose to fund it there and go out to consult with the community, that would be the process that was followed. And I guess you take your final decisions on your long-term plan for consultation next week.
Thank you. Any other speakers? If there aren't any, all those who agree say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. We move on to the Regional Planning Committee Tangata Whenua appointments. Who would like to present this paper?
Through you, Chair, suggest again we take this as read, and if necessary, to Wairama and Katrina are here to answer questions.
Any questions, councillors? Should I please, oh, councillor Sears, thank you.
I'd be happy to move and acknowledge and welcome Michelle McElroy onto the Environment and Integrated Catchments Committee.
Thank you.
Through Madam Chair, just welcome to those three outstanding Māori ladies there coming onto into that space. I understand that this would probably be we don't have any sort of outstanding appointments go through anymore.
That concludes. Are you happy to move the paper,
Happy to move it.
councillor Hokianga, and second, councillor Sears? All those who agree say aye.
All right.
Those against, carried. We have the recommendations from the Environment Integrated Catchments Committee, which was fantastic that we had that at in Waipawa down in Central Hawke's Bay, and beforehand a field trip that many of the councillors attended out in the field, seeing great projects. So really thankful for all those landowners, catchment groups, mana whenua, who were able to spend time with our councillors the day before this meeting. Anything to add, councillor Sears, as chair of this committee?
Unfortunately, the committee meeting wasn't live streamed. We weren't able to pull that together in the Waipawa theatre. The recommendation is around the policy on dangerous dams, and there was a lot of conversation at the meeting about that. So I'll leave that on the table for any other comments to be made. But we did agree to adopt it for the policy.
Yeah, we did. Thank you. Councillor Williams?
Question, presumably you agreed to recommend to this council that it adopt it.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's what we
And I just had a question, because things that strikes me about the policy is that it requires the dam owner to know. So my question, I was an apology for that meeting, is how will the dam owner know? And I think the answer to that is that they need to find out through retaining an engineer. But there's something called a classifiable dam. And my question is whether we shouldn't put the definition of classifiable dam in the statement of proposal, because it says, paragraph 2, it is expected that owners of classifiable dams will know the status of their dams. And there's all these cross references, and you can go and find the regulation. Wouldn't it help? So it might say, if your dam is bigger than X and higher than Y, you're a classifiable dam. This policy will expect you to know by obtaining an engineer. So that was my thought.
Thanks, Katrina and Saul.
Madam Chair.
Oh, to answer your question, councillor.
Pull the microphone closer to you so we can.
Sorry, is that better?
Madam Chair. Before we get into the dam recommendation, are we?
I was asking a question.
No, he's asking a question
Oh,
because he
okay.
wasn't in.
Yeah, just asking a question. I wasn't at the meeting.
Yeah.
And there's a resolution on the table to adopt that policy as a council, and I just wanted to find out
Yeah.
what it means.
He's just asking a question because of his absence that day.
Oh,
Yes,
sorry.
okay.
So
Yeah.
through you, Chair, to answer your question, councillor, we did have those threshold limits originally in the policy, but because MB is undertaking targeted consultation to perhaps change those thresholds, we've removed them and just referenced the regulations, should they change, just so the policy is more flexible. Not that we have to go back out to consultation to review the policy just after having done that.
Yeah, I am concerned that this policy won't tip off those people that we need to tip off, that they need to get involved because they potentially got a classifiable dam on their property. They might be going, oh, that's interesting. Wonder what one of those is.
Yeah,
So-
the questions around awareness.
So, yeah. Through you, Chair, we have contacted all dam owners that we know about in our consents database to inform them of these coming changes, and also to inform them of the proposed policy, and to inform them of the new regulations, and also the changes that are possible to the new regulations. So we've said in other words, hold fire, because we're not sure what the thresholds would look like, but we have informed. Yeah.
Councillor Foley?
Thank you, Chair. James Ferry said on the day that that council itself is responsible for 17 dams out of the total pool. And I felt like we kind of brushed over that on the day and more focusing on, farmer obligations. So that's an obligation to us as a council. While he didn't have a specific figure of what it might cost per dam, it could be quite significant. So do we know the cost to council yet of this on the 17 dams that we're responsible for?
Through you, Chair, no, that's not this team's. So unfortunately, we have to be a little bit pedantic here and say this is just about the policy and about consultation on the policy. The implementation of the policy and the costs of those implementation fall to the dam owner. So from a regulatory perspective and a policy perspective, we are only focused on that aspect. The assets team may well be aware of the costs, but that's not something that our policy team need to consider as part of this policy development. So I could get that question to the assets team and they could come back to you.
Yeah, I just think it's perhaps more for the benefit of my colleagues and the cost that this will fall on the general ratepayer being 30%, the targeted ratepayer being 70%, has been quite significant over that number of dams. So I just think it is very important information to know. Thank you.
Thank you. Could we possibly get those answers as an action?
Absolutely can.
Thank you. Councillor Harding.
Kia ora, Chair. Look, just my recollection of that meeting was that James Ferry did mention a couple of figures, and one of those was so there's a brief discussion about the costs of the council and the efficiencies because he mentioned, I seem to recall he mentioned a figure of about $10,000 per dam, which was at a steep discount. And he did, I think, mention a figure of about 30,000 for a one-off. So, yeah, just shows you what's at stake here for.
And was that an example of a regional council?
Well, that's the uncertainty. I mean, how does that work?
Through you, Chair, that is the cost that the regional council has previously spent on their dams through the dam safety program.
Anyway, my question, so that was just trying to help my colleagues out, but my question was just around, in the discussion that we had in Waipawa and online in my case, there was a question about just when we go to the comms for this, if we can, and to Councillor Williams' point about trying to help those people receiving communication to understand that communication, what the implications are. We know that it's quite a small number of dams. My concern is that Joe or Jane Farmer, who's got a bunch of dams for stock water, for example, what they know, and that we can help them as much as possible to demystify or at least prioritise. And our understanding, our lay understanding, is that the vast majority of those, typical stock water dams will fall outside of the policy. So it was just my plea at that time, and I just wanted to ask, has consideration been taken on board in our comms to explain ourselves and to minimise the impact on farmers who've got a lot of other more important things to think about?
Through you, Chair, I can double check that, but yes, we did take that on board. I'll check that again.
Thank you. Councillor Van Beek.
Yeah, just a question regarding the semantics of this. So if a farmer has a dam that is, according to him, is 3.9, I think if the dam level is 4 metres, anything above that is classified. If he's got a dam that he thinks is 3.9, something is being triggered, we get involved as a council, we then measure it and we deem it to be 4.1 metres, is then all of a sudden that farmer liable if something untoward would have happened to that dam?
I'm not sure liable. If it meets the threshold of the policy, then the consent holder of that dam needs to comply with the regulations and the policy.
Second question. So if a farmer builds a dam knowing that 4 meters is the threshold, and he builds it to 3.9, because that actually has happened a lot, from what I understand. They know the regulations. Red tape is a real issue for them. And that's why I talked in the previous training about environmental plus consents. So we actually make it easy for them, but they haven't done that. There's a lot of that occurred. So if a dam would break and it is deemed to be a classifiable dam and the farmer was not aware of that, will he then be liable?
I think, through you, Chair, there's a whole lot of circumstances that we would need to consider when we take enforcement action on any policy. Essentially, the policy is a central government-led policy, and as a consent holder of a dam or an owner of a dam, then you are responsible for ensuring your requirements under the law.
So if we have a whole lot of dams that are 3.9 meters, they believe that they actually don't actually have to fall under this policy, and that's possibly the dam owners, and I think that's why I like what Zan is proposing. A lot of dam owners, we actually would have missed out because we have sent letters to them, making them aware of this policy, but we're actually missing out a whole lot of dam owners that think that they actually fall outside it because they never actually applied for a consent. May not even have known that there was actually such a thing as a consent for a dam. And, you know, I've been to many farmer field days, and it gets talked about, you know, what you can and cannot do.
So through you, Chair, we are working very closely with our integrated catchment team and the compliance team. Every officer that finds themselves out on a property will be aware of the regulations and will be engaging. We are hoping with landowners to make them aware of that. We've got a regulation implementation team that will be working really closely with our catchment collectives and our integrated catchment teams to ensure that we get the message as far as wide as possible.
Thank you.
All right, we have recommendations from this committee. Would you like to move, Councillor Curtin?
No, I wouldn't, Madam Chair.
Do you have a question?
Yes, I do. I appreciate that dams are the most vital issue facing Hawke's Bay at the moment. But we've got these recommendations, and the paper that we've got before council simply doesn't reflect the meeting we had of the Environment Committee in Waipawa, and I am concerned that we land today with considering the dam, and we overlook Resilient River Program, Recovery Work Program. I know my colleague wants to talk about Tomato Peak Trust presentation, Needlegrass and Land for Life business case. Is there room to consider those less important issues than dams in this paper?
Were they decision items?
Well, my point is this: no, they weren't, but there were some excellent papers delivered of vital information to the public, and they seem to have been overlooked for transmission to this forum in favour of this thing about dams.
Yeah, I think the point being there that this report only reflects the decisions, but what you're saying is we have far more robust conversations around the information items that should be included from now on.
Well, go back a step and go to recommendation 1, receives and notes the recommendations of the committee. So we are in fact adopting those recommendations from the Environment Committee along with this decision item. So there are two issues at play here. One is considering the policy around dams. The other is considering those papers we discussed in.
I know what you mean, and we did accept those reports and information items.
But they're only recommendations to council.
Leanne?
Excuse me, but in They are resolutions of the committee to accept the information items. The only recommendations that the committee made to the council were in relation to the dam policy. Just if that clarifies.
No, it doesn't. And the usual process is to recommend those various reports to council as opposed to their containment at a committee level.
Okay, so I understand what you mean, Councillor Curtin, and it is a little bit like semantics. But I think from now on, we just clarify with governance what gets brought through from committee and what we resolve there to full council. And I hear that it's just important to have those information items that we discussed and are important to this organisation to come through to council. But I think for today's case, because we could do that with every other committee meeting just approved.
Speaking of that, Madam Chair,
Yes.
it's been my understanding for quite some time that recommendations are made, decisions are not made at committee level. Recommendations are made to council for confirmation by council. So that's my point, that when recommendations are forwarded, we adopt all of the agenda recommendations, just not if like that decision often, even though there was a receiving of a report, we recommend to council that council receives that report. That's my understanding of the process. Someone else may have a different view, but
Councillor Sears.
Madam Chair, I think the pity was that it wasn't live streamed. The committee's work streams should be discussed in committee and live streamed for visibility of those. My understanding has always been what comes to full council is the recommended decision items which are put here. We do usually have the opportunity to speak to our committees. That's quite true. But I don't see the reasons. There's no double debate needed for the receiving of reports as we did receive last week, except for those that we are recommending for adoption. So are you, Councillor Curtin, are you concerned about the lack of information coming through or the lack of visibility of that? Because usually we would have that on the live streaming from the committee.
no, I appreciate what you're saying, Councillor. Don't want to debate it, but I just wondered whether we can now have a determination, perhaps the Chief Executive might comment on this or go and find the information out. It is my understanding that the committees, that the information provided to the committee ultimately finds their way to council. And it may simply be a noting, receives and notes the recommendations from the committee, which includes the recommendations made at the committee to receive the reports and notes.
I'm happy to take that away. I don't know that exact answer there. I think we want to just make sure we clarify the language. What I'm conscious of is that not having council needing to receive all of the reports that committees have already had that aren't decision items, but that decisions decisions recommended by committees should absolutely come to council. But double handling every report on non-decision items would be achieved.
May I suggest we take that away as an action to clarify? But for now, we have 3 recommendations, and we are going to have to move on. So we have a mover, Councillor Sears, and a seconder, Councillor Roadley.
I think Councillor
Or was that a question, Councillor Roadley? Any more speakers? Councillor Williams?
Yeah, just look, I don't mean to, I mean to help, not hinder, but the recommendation is, sorry, the bit about the dam policy. If we were to just simply adopt 2, we'd just be adopting a recommendation that we adopt the policy. And I think what we actually need to do is under 2 is take out the word recommends. So we receive the recommendations as 1, and 2 is simply that Hawke's Bay Regional Council adopts. Because of, yeah.
So that 3 should read adopts.
Yeah, just take out the word
Policy,
recommends.
yeah, for consultation.
under
Yeah,
2.
okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Otherwise, we kind of adopted it.
Thank you.
Spot it.
Councillor Foley?
Yeah, look, just sympathise a little bit with councillor Curtin there, and specifically more around the content of the day and holding it down in Waipawa, and that was the Chilean needlegrass paper. And if you remember there was an announcement there, well, Ian clarified that the notice of the gravel extraction ban was to be lifted 1st of April. That is hugely significant news down there, and it would have been nice to have seen that mentioned again in the paper today. So just note that everyone is very happy with that news down in Central Hawke's Bay, and yeah, looking forward to seeing some gravel coming out of that area river.
Councillor Foley. Were there any other speakers? Councillor Van Dyke.
Yeah, personally, I really, as you may have picked up, I've mentioned it before last week as well, I've really struggled with this paper. Because I think it's actually been on our radar for a long time, not us as governors, but as council. I would have loved to have seen submissions made by our council to central government in regards to some of the semantics of this, especially also at the cost that it actually is going to bring. And now to actually receive it almost at the 11th hour for us to make now a decision, because it ought to be implemented. And, I asked what the risk is if we don't. I didn't really get an answer on that. So I really struggle with this paper.
Councillor Brodley.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Was reference to the dangerous dams, earthquake-prone dams policy. My understanding is that the government has shifted the dial on this, and that this policy is just the Hawke's Bay Regional Council's updating of our current policy to align with the shifted government settings. And in my view, that is part of our obligation as council, is to be aligned with what those current rules are, and acknowledging that the detail of those rules isn't actually landed. But I appreciate that the staff have kept the ability to insert those details when they become apparent without needing to consult. I do not believe we are accepting the content of the implications of that. That's actually beyond our control. And I agree with Councillor Van Beek that it's very vexing and it will have added cost, but I don't think that's the Regional Council's making. This is about keeping our policies in line with the law.
Thank you. Councillor Williams.
Yeah, thank you. Speaking to the motion that we adopt the policy, I would prefer that the consultation document say at section 2, you should read this policy if you have a dam as a classifiable dam. A classifiable dam is currently defined in Regulation 5 as 4 metres, 1,000, 40,000, but this is subject to change. Rather than at the moment, I'm just reading a classifiable dam is defined in Regulation. That's nice, and it relies on you clicking the link. I just think you're trying to capture people, hit them over the head if they want to get involved. Yeah. It would be better to say what they currently say and they're subject to change. That would be what I would prefer, but otherwise I'm happy with the motion for reasons discussed.
Just briefly, Chair, noted, I think I'm right in saying that the regulations come into effect in May, which is soon. And so I would be hopeful that our council has a strong degree of pragmatism in its monitoring of the implementation of that, not only because it's a tight time frame, but also the availability of things like engineers to be able to give effect to the work.
Thank you. Councillor Curtin.
Madam Chair, I'll echo commentary made. The in the committee for this issue, and my view remains the same. I'm just not keen on enabling madness, and this is what this does: is that an indeterminate policy that is confusing. We are enabling bureaucracy in Wellington to impose something on us that makes no sense to this council, makes no sense to dam owners. It's a dog. It needs to be called out.
Thank you, councillor. Councillor Sears.
I am still happy to move the recommendation. I suppose my question is to councillor Williams' suggestion for an amendment on it. We are not adopting the policy, we're adopting the policy for consultation. So I wonder if that's the stage, at consultation for additions to the policy to be made
Yeah,
then.
no, my amendment was to the consultation document.
Oh, your amendments to the
Yeah,
Yeah,
consultation.
just,
Okay.
it says, the sentence is, should you read this? You know?
Understand.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, I would be happy with that. Yeah.
Thank you all for your commentary on this, and I think we've been able to shape actually how difficult of a position we're in to have to bring this policy, that we're not happy about it. But I think we need to send a clear signal to central government that we are not. So on that, I'd like to add another recommendation that provides for a letter to do so, based on the challenges that we've heard from around the table, that we will still go through our process that we need to, and that's a given, but that in effect how impractical it is and the timing of it, particularly in recovery mode, that we should be making that clear. So is there a seconder for that recommendation to be added? Thank you, councillor Harding.
Can I speak to that?
Yes.
I fully support you in that, but it puts me in an awkward position because I approve of that. I was going to abstain, you see. So now I'm
You
approving.
can still abstain.
Yeah,
Yes, you
that's
still need
okay.
to abstain.
That's
Yes.
fine. You just made it a bit harder for me.
Yeah, no other speakers?
So just
Yeah.
a point of order, Madam Chair, is that your recommendation there at 2.3, so I can oppose one and support another?
Or new resolution 4.
It'll be resolution 4. That's what I proposed.
I'll support that.
So what I'm putting on the table is 1, 2, 3, and 4. All those who agree say aye.
Aye.
Those against?
Abstain.
Abstain?
Abstain.
Abstain?
Against.
Against and abstain. So 2 abstain, 1 against, the rest agree. Thank you. Carried.
Carried, has it carried?
Yes, that's great.
They'll be that vote will be included in the letter?
I don't think we have to go into detail. We move on to HBRC standing orders.
Through your chair, I'm going
Yes,
to hand this
you
one
have
to Leanne to.
Great. So, councillors, we can take this as read and I'll try my best to answer any questions. I did want to highlight to you that a couple of changes since the marked up version went to you. One was councillor Harding picked up on page 16, I think it was, where I'd missed one of the physically present that I needed to cross out. It was to do with the quorum.
Right, yep, that was to do with the quorum.
There it is, 10.1. The quorum is not just those that are physically. So what I've done is I've added them to the recommendations that, so that you can vote on them individually, whether you want to accept the change or not, and then overall. Also, in the appendices, I have shifted. Sorry. First of all, in the public forums, what I've done is I read it again after reading the paper that would go in with the agendas, and I saw that it had put the bit about that you needed to request a day in advance, that they had put that under the time limits, and it didn't make sense to me. So I've moved it up to requests must be made to the HBRC governance team and put our contact details there, so that people, when they see that, they know who to contact, not just the meeting secretary.
Okay, can we
Um,
just run through one at a time because we might have questions? So, so we'll just start with number 14. Any questions about that amendment? No? Okay. 14.1.
It's the same. So I've just taken that sentence and moved it up. But the other thing was that I was unsure whether council wanted me to add, to keep those in or just leave it blank.
Sorry, just.
And it used
clarify,
to
keep-
say just at each scheduled meeting, and there was no guidance as to what kind of meeting or.
Right, so you've just specified which meetings.
As per the resolution that was passed at the Corporate and
Right.
Strategic Committee.
We better follow what was resolved there. Yep, so we
Which
just
is
keep those
Are you
meetings
happy?
there?
Yeah.
Yep, Okay.
Yep, happy with that?
yep.
Petitions was a change to include our guidelines as an appendix. So that was, this is taking out present and voting, same calling a division. The meeting secretary is the person that's recording the minutes, so it should be that they're recording the division, not the chief executive.
Yep. Makes sense.
That's just a sensible thing.
Yeah.
I have inserted the plain English reasons for excluding the public. So they have the fancy wording in the legislation, you know, prejudices and all of that. So what I've done is I've put the plain English versions of those into the appendix so that it's more easily understood.
You've taken the lawyer speak out.
Yes, well, I've tried to.
We tried it sometimes too, but it
So,
doesn't work.
for example,
Right.
prejudice the position, I have to put up to avoid damaging the measures that protect them, not prejudicing them. I don't think that word actually reflects what we're trying to do. They're pretty standard, and if you're in reading them, you think that some of that wording could be simplified even further, I'm happy to take suggestions. We've put a sample resolution in the next appendix to show how we will do all the things that the Ombudsman suggested in his report about including, you know, what the actual harm would be that would be caused and the plain English reason, and also how we've considered the public interest in receiving that information. And then that's just pretty standard of what happens if somebody is going to be remaining in as an expert witness or a subject matter expert. I put in your public excluded that the resolution about if council wants to make some of the information public straight after the meeting, they would normally do that in public excluded, and so I've added that in there. And I think lastly, I gave you the workshop guidelines separately, and then it was adding the guidelines for the petitions. And this came from the governance team talking with a couple of people that wanted to present a petition, but first wanted to know, you know, what should it include? How do I go about doing that? So we pinched it from another council and just made changes so that it would reflect, you know, just changing our language.
Great idea.
So I think that's all from me. What sort of questions?
Any questions
got
to
any?
mainly the amendments? There are none? No?
Slow down.
Sorry? Slow down, sorry.
Sorry, Leanne, just to check, we've already seen the changes, but you just showed us there were 3 or 4 that you have just added.
Yes,
Yeah.
and I've added those into the resolution, and I can specify which ones those are. Now, it was 10 point, sorry. 10.1.
The council's quorum.
14 public forums, 14.1 public forum time limits. And then it was Appendix 1, reasons to exclude the public, and the others were already there, so there was just 3.
Okay. Let's take any questions.
Yeah.
Very dry subject.
I think it's great that we've got the plain English, but I'm just reading the table at the end, and the wording in the first column isn't actually a 100% replica of the statute. In other words, it's already an interpretation.
That's the plain English,
No, the first column.
yes, that's the translation.
No, that's the second column.
Well, it's actually both.
So they're
because
both,
we haven't-
neither of those columns
So
is
one
exactly the
is a
statute.
translation, and then the shortened, the very, very
Oh, so they're
shortened
both translations.
version.
Yeah,
The
they're
first
both.
one is
oh,
the
they're-
translation, and then that's a summary of the translation.
Oh, okay, so none of them are the actual words of the statute.
No.
Okay.
And add a column in with that if you'd like.
No, look, and that was, I was just sort of looking at it and realising that they weren't quite exactly the same. The question is this. It's a bigger point that all of these grounds can be outweighed where it is desirable in the public interest to make the information available. And I'm not sure where that fits into our reckoning, and this came up with the discussion around funding for our flood protection works. The fact that we've got a ground, because it might prejudice the commercial position of someone, doesn't mean we necessarily can or should put that meeting in public excluded. Because, and I just think it would be useful to have a signal in here that for all of these tests, there is an overriding test of whether it is desirable in the public interest to actually have the meeting in public.
So what we have is another table for staff to use that has the question, what is the harm? And how have you considered the public interest? And why do you consider that the need to withhold outweighs that? And that would come through in the resolution. So the sample resolution sort of
So I should
has
go
that.
to that.
Yeah. In Appendix 2.
Hang on.
And the table that the staff are going to use will have actual examples. And I'm working to make those real-life examples that this council has potentially considered.
To reasonably, So where does it talk about there that there's no countervailing public interest in making the...
So in the one that I did use, they did say that there is a public interest in receiving the information, but that they thought that in the interests of those people involved, that their interests outweighed it, and that all the information would be put into the public through the consultation.
Yeah, I get it. I just think it would be useful to have a reminder for all of those resolutions, because some of them the grounds have got public interest in the grounds themselves. You sort of do a double count of the public interest. Like there's a public interest in continuing to receive confidential, that sort of thing.
So it would be clearer
Good to
if
sort
it
of
had a
untangle it.
separate.
Yeah, here's the ground, what we say, countervailing public interest, yes, no, why.
Yeah.
that sort of thing, I think, just to remind us each time.
Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you.
No, that's a good suggestion. I'll make sure that that happens.
Any further questions for Leanne? Thank you, councillor
Cool, Chair. Just, Leanne, just this point about 10.1. I'm just looking in the recommendation and I don't see it there. So, but I see 12.8. So I'm just not sure, and I haven't had a chance to flick between the two.
I'm sorry, I added them into my version here because they weren't in the original version.
Yep. Yeah, no, I'm just looking at purely the recommendation that we've got in Stella now. That doesn't mention 10.1.
No, because that was added. So that's why I've added it into
Okay,
my
it's already there.
resolution.
Okay, all right.
So
Wonderful, thank you.
Any further questions for Leanne? Thank you, Leanne. Can I please have a mover for that item? Councillor Williams and a seconder, Councillor Harding, would you like to speak further?
Oh, look, I'm just delighted that we've reached this point. I think it's been a long time coming, and particularly around workshops in public and putting greater daylight and transparency on our decision making. I think there's been over the last 2 or 3 years just an enormous amount of work done by this council that our public haven't seen. And then there's the danger when we actually get to the decision item, we don't do justice to the journey that we've been on, or have an opportunity to really test and engage about the proposal so that people can see and hear what we've been asking, inquiring about, thinking about, grappling with prior to making decisions. And I really think this has just got a lot to commend it. So I really just wanted to say that. I think it bodes well for the future.
Thank you, Councillor Harding.
Kia ora, Chair. Look, I just support that, tauko with that, those fine words. It is great progress. I just for the interest of my fellow councillors, possibly not the interest of my fellow councillors, but anyway, I did explore with the governance team about whether we should take the standing orders one step further to allow online meetings, wholly online meetings, if we so chose. The answer I received back was that that is outside of our mandate under the LGA, and that remains at the pleasure of central government from time to time if we want to go down that route. We have learnt through COVID and cyclone that it's less than ideal. Thankfully, it's not on the table in normal course of events, even though it's physically, theoretically possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Roadley.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just wanting to acknowledge the work, Leanne, that you've put into this and what it means as far as what Councillor Williams has already referenced about taking our community on the journey that we are privileged often to do with our great staff who sit in behind us, and also acknowledge your additional pathways you've created by actually showing people how they can interact with us and with the council by those, this is literally how you do it. So yeah, great work and thank you very much. We look forward to the process that will, or the results of what this process will bring. So yeah, thank you.
Any further speakers? There are none. All those who agree say aye.
Aye.
Those against, carried. Thank you, Leanne. We're on to item 10, the annual freshwater science charges. Nick.
Thank you. Through you, Chair, I just ask our CFO to come to the table to take you through this item, and noting that we've got our science manager, Anna, here as well to add any extra commentary as needed.
Great. Thank you. Thanks, Chris.
Okay, through you, Chair. We've presented a paper here looking for approval and remissions for our freshwater science charges for the 23-24 year. This is based on the amount of work that has been done. So Section 36 requires us to base our charges on the work that has been done around there. During the year, there's been, as in last year, a bit of diversion of activity around water quality to the cyclone stuff. This equates to about $180,000, which is about a 15% of the total cost of the freshwater science discharge charges. So we're recommending a remission of 15% on those charges. We also have our low flow monitoring, which has spent very little this year compared to what we would normally. And the expectation is that we won't have a huge amount, although the dry autumn conditions at the moment are making that a little bit there. But the amount of money that is spent over there, we believe that we can get away happily have an 80% remission, so dropping the rate from $250 to $50 each there. I would note that in our 23-24 annual plan, we did have a budget for remissions, which was mainly related to the cyclone around hardship in there, of about $256,000. During this year for the previous year charges, we had 66 applications for this, which totaled about $45,000 of remissions. So that budget there is probably more than we need for the actual cyclone hardship budget remissions, but allows us to cover off these ones without an impact on the ratepayer.
Thank you. Do we have any questions for the team up here? Councillor Harding.
Kia ora, Chair, and through you. Paragraph 21, low flow monitoring can be proposed to be invoiced at $50 instead of $250. Question is simply, do we know what our marginal cost of issuing an invoice is, and also potentially the marginal cost of replying to all the or responding to the queries of them? Because at some point it's possibly more cost effective for us to issue no invoice at all. Thank you.
I would say I haven't got the marginal cost figures to hand, but I would say that these charges are part of other charges in the same invoice as well.
Fantastic answer, thank you.
Any further questions? Oh, Councillor Sears.
Only really it's a comment really, to say thank you for picking it up, and we don't want to be charging for what we're not doing. It's simple as that, so I appreciate that.
Well done. Councillor Foley.
Thank you, Chair. On the surface, it makes sense. We're not doing, as Councillor says just said, we're not doing a service, so we don't charge them. Presumably, though, the staff are still sitting there, we're still incurring cost. Is that correct?
I can probably answer that one. So it's not that the work for the science side of things, so low flows is slightly different, but for the science side of things, it is purely that the science that we would typically do that feeds into the information or the benefit to the consent holders has been pivoted into more of the general or public good science. So the staff is still there, but we have been fortunate that we have been successful in getting some funding for some of that cyclone recovery work, like analyses. We have also got 2 extra FTEs within our environmental information team as part of our cyclone related costs. So the cyclone work that has been being done has taken a bigger portion in the public good rather than the consent related benefit.
Just a supplementary question. So I think you can see where I'm going. So does any of the cost that's not falling on the consent holder now, is it falling on the general ratepayer, or have we picked up enough external funding from cyclone, related sources that?
I think, the answer there is that we have picked up a reasonable amount of funding, so it's not all falling on the general ratepayer there. Technically, the cost, the 35% that would normally go to the fees and charges is a bit less, so therefore the 65% to the general ratepayer goes up, but we've received some funding to offset that there. So and all of this gets washed up at the end of the year. It hasn't changed the rates to the general ratepayer, but we washed up at the end of the year within the overall general fund into there. We don't see a big hit into that general fund coming from this, especially with the additional revenue that we've received.
Thank you.
Thank you. And for the questions, we have recommendation 1, 2, and either between 3 and 4, 3 being status quo, and 4 with those amendments described in 4.1, 2 and 3. Councillor Harding.
Kia ora, Chair. I'm happy to move 1, 2 and 4.
May I have a seconder for that, please? Councillor Foley. Thank you. Would you like to speak to that, Councillor Harding? Councillor Foley?
No, thanks.
Any other speakers? There are none. All those who agree say aye. Aye. Those against, carried. Thank you, team. Thank you. We now have Hawke's Bay Regional Investment Company, item number 11.
Through you, Chair, Mr. Skirman is due to be joining council online. Whilst the papers get the sign off of a GM, in this case from Susie, it's an HPIC presentation to council.
Okay, so maybe we wait until Mr. Skirman arrives?
He should be.
Yeah, he's coming. He's coming, okay.
He's coming.
We'll give him a minute. Item 12.
Give him a minute, or we can move to item 12 if you prefer, Chair.
Yeah, 12.
Fixing the comments.
Oh, fixing the comments, yeah. The hardest one. Okay, any questions with this item? I'm happy to move. Councillor Foley, happy to second. All those who agree say aye.
Aye.
Those against, carried. Here he comes.
There he is.
So through you, Chair, I think that sounds as though Mr. Skirman is joining us online.
Who's trying?
Tripped over the wires.
You're right, when he left.
Red dot on the left hand.
Oh, here he is.
So essentially this item will update council on HBRIC's progress in terms of the group's managed funds request for proposal. It will talk to you about HBRIC Limited's chairperson succession, and it will also present HBRIC's draft 2024-25 statement of intent for your review and comment. That sounds as though we have dropping in and out.
There's nobody letting him in. Oh, here he is.
Here he is. Kia ora, Tom. Can you hear us?
Good, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you. Can't see you.
I can see you and I can see me, and it says my video's on, so
Fine.
probably better off without seeing me.
Okay, well, we'll hand it over to you, Tom. You've got 3 items to discuss with us.
Okay, thanks very much, everybody. So there are 3 items. I'll take the paper as read. What I propose in terms of the updates on managed funds, I'm just happy to answer any questions, and look, I may steer some of those questions to Will, who was part of that process. Again, we'll just take any questions on the HBRIC chair succession, and then probably may move into a discussion around the SOI. Is that about right?
Yes. Would you like to get into the SOI now?
Can do that. We probably can rattle through the other ones pretty quickly, but whichever way around you want to do it.
Well, we have recommendations that cover them all. So, but okay, that's fine. Will, would you like to add?
Yeah.
First 2?
Well, I can certainly talk to the managed fund review, Tom, unless you had anything to start off with.
No, I think you could just share the flavour of where we've got to.
Yeah. So look, I think council can be very confident in the process that's been undertaken, and a big thank you to Tom, to Susie and the staff, and Scott Hamilton in particular in the work that went into this. It's been pretty thorough and intensive, and it led to 2 days of interviews of 6 managed fund providers out there, 5 of them being kind of well-known, established brands that you'd all be aware of, and one, I guess, more newer boutique firm, but all impressive. So that took 2 days. As you can understand, we spent a lot of time with them and then deliberating, and some further, I guess, analysis post that over the last week or so. I think for me, what came of it was there's the ability to not just employ a new or another fund manager, but it's actually to get and access a team I guess, investment people that can offer us so much more to not just HBRIC and investments, but to the whole regional council and the finance strategy and et cetera, particularly with, you know, the $250 million that we're about to spend over the next few years. So I think, and we got a bit of feedback on the current providers. As you know, it's split into two, and I learned a lot really about looking, going backwards, is one, give us some quite good support. The other one, don't give us any support. And they actually stated that it was to do with, or their reasoning was around, they only got 50% of the funds last time, and they would have preferred the whole lot. So, I think, yeah, I think the whole process is going to be very beneficial to HBRIC and council going forward. We have we have come up with a recommendation that's to go back to HBRIC board probably today, is it, Tom? And so we'll come back to you with a recommendation pretty shortly, but just be confident it's, no? I won't come back here. Okay, doesn't need to, but it's a very, very thorough process, and we will establish a very good outcome for the managed funds going forward. So, yeah.
Thanks, Will, and we'll look forward to the update at the next quarterly presentation at CNS. So thank you. Would you like to talk any further to the HBRIC chair succession?
Look, I think it's pretty self-explanatory. Obviously, Dan has been in the role for some time now. That term is due to come to its end shortly, and so we do need to start that process of a new chair for HBRIC. It's, yeah, pretty self-explanatory.
Okay.
Unless there's any questions on that.
No questions for Councillor Foley?
I have a couple of questions. On the fund, are we likely to have one provider, fund management?
I would rather just run through our process with HBRIC before we tip our hand there, if that's okay.
Okay.
Still to be determined, yes.
Just a couple more quick ones, if you like, Chair. I was interested in the objective around performance targets, and one of the objectives being to maintain a majority holding in the port, and I didn't think that was an objective really, it was just kind of status quo, isn't it? Just note.
Yeah, that's correct. It's a strategic asset, yeah.
The third thing was, and apologies if you've answered this before, but do we get a, at what point can we expect a overall strategy from the HBRIC, which is to say these are the sorts of things we're going to be doing in future. We think you should sell Wellington properties or whatever it is. At what point do we get a bit of a steer on that?
I might direct that to Tom.
Yeah, look, thanks for the question, and look, I'll just follow up from Will's point, is that we kind of feel like once we've completed the process around the managed funds, that we can bring a lot more horsepower to that discussion, and so we anticipate that happening, you know, quite shortly. We've got a board meeting in May where that's going to be on the table. So yeah, we're as keen to get into that as councillors, and that'll be coming back, you know, as soon as we can get to it.
Okay.
But it's high on the list.
Okay, so can I just be clear, Tom? So reasonably shortly after May, you'll be coming back to us to say this is what we reckon we should be doing.
Yep.
Thank you. There are no other questions on those two items. Tom, I'll hand it over to you for the statement of intent discussion.
Yeah, okay, so, and look, it's not ideal me not being in the room, because this can be, if we end up in a deep wordsmithing process here, I'm hoping someone can take some decent notes. But yeah, so look, we're all aware that the statement of intent is an annual document that CCOs and CCTOs have to present to council. There are some statutory timeframes around it. They're quite prescriptive in terms of what should be in them and shouldn't be in them, and it's not necessarily maybe all the useful information that is prescribed to be in them. This document is quite a major rewrite, clearly because of the changes that have been made not only to the SIPO but to HBRIC's mandate through the statement of expectation that council issued late last year. And what we've tried to do in crafting this document is just capture the fact that, look, technically, the statement of intent relates to HBRICS, assets that are under HBRICS management and, within the confines of its own entity. But we've tried to broaden this out so it captures HBRICS sort of wider mandate in relation to overall council investment, the group's investments, and so we've used those sort of definitions through there. So probably just best if I just take questions or offer anyone to send detailed feedback direct to us, because the process from here is that we take all feedback back to the HBRIC board, and then it can redraft and present to council prior to 30 June.
Thanks, Tom. Councillor McIntosh.
Tom, this is, you might have partially covered this off with your previous answer, but if I go back to those performance targets, would you expect, if we're having this conversation in 12 months' time, to be more specific with the things that you're aiming to achieve?
Look, and it's 100% the right question, and it goes, and I checked this again. The requirements of the Local Government Act, talk about setting out, non-financial objectives, and so that's the requirement for the statement of intent. I suppose HBRIC as an organisation is very mindful of the drivers that were set down in the statement of expectation, the letter that you wrote, which talks a lot more around the financial expectations, not only dividend, but inflation proofing of assets, and beyond that, building resilience and funds. So I think it's a good question as to whether that's a gap in here, because this is kind of a useful document to point to, but we can definitely just take your feedback on what you would like to see in terms of these performance targets. But yeah, and helpfully the legislation sort of talks about non-financial performance targets, apart from a couple of metrics that you see later in the document.
Yeah, Chair, my view is it would be helpful to have some more specific things in the document that are a bit more meaningful to us than the legislative ones.
So, Tom, an opportunity to really work through that. What's the thinking there?
Well, I think it'd be useful to maybe see, draw some of that language from the statement of intent in there, as being, I suppose, additive to the information in there, which really sets those metrics around, the entire performance that's required from the portfolio. But again, what we're trying to sort of balance here is what's the performance you want from HBRIC and what's the performance you want from the group investment assets. So we can do some thinking about that, and I can put that to the board, and we can bring that back to you in the next crank of the handle.
That sounds fantastic. Thank you. Councillor Harding.
Got it, Chair, and through you to Tom. Page 5, section 6, our role, and towards the bottom there, our role as owner and manager of HBRIC Investments assets. That first bullet point, I'm not sure what it's intended there. Monitor the financial performance of corporate governance of Napier Port. I'm not sure whether that's correct, and I just don't understand it, because I don't, or whether it just needs wordsmithing. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose it's just us saying that we're going to hold the board to account for the Napier Port's boards to account for the financial performance of the port. But like you say, it's not elegantly worded.
Okay, so the point there being we're not directly monitoring the financial performance, we are monitoring it through the board. Is that what that's suggesting?
Yeah, as a shareholder, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Can we just clarify that, please, Tom?
Yeah, I've got that.
Thank you. Councillor Williams.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Tom. Look, a couple of things. Have you got any idea? I've seen this 12.5, 13 million, 13.5 million in several documents that are in front of us at the moment, including our financial strategy and what have you. Have we got a sense of what those are in terms of percentage return on asset value across the group?
Yes, we have. So that goes back, if you recall, from the investment strategy, the work that Scott did. There were 3 tiers of numbers. There was 3% cash, on the investment portfolio, plus a 2.5%, I think 2 or 2.5%, sorry, I can't remember, inflation, increase in the value of the portfolio for inflation proofing, and beyond that, profit retention for resilience. So, and I think that kind of goes to Councillor McIntosh's earlier point. I think that would all probably be better if this was all articulated in this one document to look at the total return, which pushes it up above sort of 5.5%.
Could you remind me, please, because despite this document saying that the statement of expectations was on the website, I just Googled it and searched it and said there is no such thing. Did the statement of expectations have that 3%, 2.5%, etc. in it?
Correct.
Great. So could someone please email that to me again, because I can't find it on the website. That may be me, but you try, see how you get on. My other question was just really around the question of time frame. The statements of our mission and our objectives. I don't think this is detailed wordsmithing, but the objectives are to grow the financial returns. Well, it's reasonably self-evident. And then the first bullet point objectives provide with a consistent and growing cash income stream. I wonder whether we don't need to add the words over the long term into both the mission statement and that first bullet point, because there may be times where HBRIC decides to make a call that it's better to sort of squirrel things away than be too, generous in its distribution to us, bearing in mind one of the KPIs itself references the longer term, which is assess and when active, develop a portfolio of other investments for long-term commercial return. So it's just a question of whether we put the reference to longer term in the mission and in that first bullet point. What do you think?
Yeah, so you can't see any harm in doing that.
No.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? And just keeping in mind, we'll have a broad update on the strategy next time HBRIC are in front of us for their quarterly report. And thank you to both you, Will and Neil, for your leadership in HBRIC on our behalf. Would you like to move?
Happy to move.
These recommendations. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor McIntosh, would you like to speak any further?
No, just thanks again to all those involved in the background. There is a lot of work, a lot of effort going on, so it's certainly going to be exciting to watch it all unfold and hopefully generate some good cash flow returns for council.
Thank you. McIntosh?
These guys are the light at the end of the tunnel for us. We've got huge financial challenges, no pressure, fellas, but it is, we have an opportunity to do a lot of good through this and make a hell of a lot of difference to our rate, a hell of a lot of relief to our rates in future. So that.
Okay, if there are no other speakers, all those who agree say aye.
Aye.
Those against, carried. It must be time for a break, I think. So we'll just pause there for 5 minutes, grab a cuppa and a chocolate biscuit, and we'll be back. Thank you. Get Mick to open. Thank you.
Through you, Chair. Whilst there's no significant decision attached to this item, it is quite a significant point along the recovery journey for this organisation and wider communities. So immediately after the cyclone occurred, HPRC set up an internal recovery team led very ably by Louise McPhail, supported in many months by a whole lot of staff, covering everything from rural recovery through to flood mitigation and resilience, through to land categorisation, silt and debris, and a whole host of other work that the organisation has been involved in. As we've entered this calendar year, the end of the first quarter of this calendar year, we're morphing that approach to a project management office to deliver on our flood resilience and flood mitigation projects. Our rural recovery work is being reabsorbed into our normal work. Our policy work around things like OICs, so Orders of Council, and so on, is reabsorbed into the policy and regulatory team, and our Māori partnerships team equally increasingly focused on support out into the projects that are occurring as part of recovery. So essentially recovery is becoming part of a not so normal business as usual that will take us through the next few years, and you as a council will be going out to your community very shortly with a 3-year version of a long-term plan, very much focused on recovery and resilience. Early in the piece, working with the Regional Recovery Agency, there was a view of a series of recovery plans. The first iteration of those was done, and again, our input into that led by Louise, Julianne and the team. With that done, it quickly became clear that trying to do another round of recovery planning across the region, was going to be a huge fatigue for communities who had already been engaged on a whole lot of things, as well as rebuilding their lives. Equally, it was really clear from central government that turning up with a long list of newer recovery ideas in this fiscal environment was not going to be a particularly sensible place to be. So instead, we have a much more targeted conversation going on with government ministers through our regional leaders. But as part of that recovery team, I think it was really important to document what this organisation and it has done over that period of time, both internally and the work that we've done to support communities and community recovery. So the report here, and Julianne McLean, who's been part of that recovery journey, has been a critical author of that, really tries to capture a broad view of all of that work that's gone on. I think not only is that important for the organisation now to have a record of that, but it's a really important document as we learn how to do recovery from major events. And unfortunately, we all know that at some stage in the future, there will be another major event. And the lessons we have learned from recovery here are really important to capture now because they'll inform our next time round. So to sum all of that up, really this is I think a really valuable record of the last 14 months of recovery work. And I'll just hand over to Louise, Julianne McLean, who you may not, and you know Jess Bennett.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. I think Nick's covered most of it, but this, when it became apparent that we wouldn't be required to do a second edition of the Environmental Resilience Plan, we felt it was important to record all the work that this organisation has done over the last 12 months and have it as a legacy document, and as Nick said, to be able to look at in 5 and 10 years' time when some of us may either have forgotten or not be here, for future reference. And it brings to close for us the last 12 to 14 months, but recovery will carry on, as Nick said, through the LTP process and the program management office that has been stood up. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you. We all have the plan here. It's great. So just a huge thank you to you and your team, Louise. And I reflect back on the many community meetings we've been at, and many of our staff and councillors have been at. So it's been a very long road. I think this is a fantastic piece of history that's captured in here, and I think sometimes we forget how far we've come, and if we look nationally, especially through land categorisation, we are a region leading the way in that aspect, and it's always reflected through ministers talking about how our region is at the front when it comes to recovery. Also, I'd like to acknowledge all the staff who have taken on roles that no one could have ever imagined having to take on. I think of silt and debris and the ongoing mission to get support from central government to deliver for our most impacted communities, those who are still shoveling silt out from under their houses, still those who are doing it around orchards and primary production land. So you're right, this isn't the end, but we have come a long way, and I'm very thankful that we have this as a record. So I'll just open up for questions and comments, but I think, yeah, huge acknowledgement to you and the team, Louise. Yeah, sure. Sophie.
Thank you. And yeah, I think you've covered a lot of those sentiments really nicely, Chair. Thank you. And it was fantastic that we knew early enough that we didn't need to move into that second phase, because that first document, I don't know that you slept a lot through that, Louise, to be honest. And I like so much the way you put this together regionally within these places that people can go to their own place first and come out to the big picture. And I really like the way you have made the point of talking about what it is community is still worried about, or those touch points for community that still matter. We had the floods in 2011 at Waimarama, and we've just taken some walls off the back of our shed to redo something, and my husband took off some of the boards, there's silt, inside there still from 2011, and it reminded me, thinking about this will be decades and decades on, still the effects of what happened here will be relevant to our community. And I think the document is a brilliant piece. Now when people say to me, what have you done for the last year? What's been going on? You read this and you actually have a breadth sense of the enormous amount of work outside all of the work that we would think we would have should have been doing or would have been doing. And you've done it in a way that's so readable and accessible. I just really are taken. I've been, when I read it early and made those few comments, I was really taken back with how beautifully you've done this for our community, really, while capturing the technical part. So yeah, huge thank you for doing that for us as well, because it's something I can look back on in 10 years and sort of, because when you're in it, you don't often quite remember what's going on. So congratulations, thank you.
Any other? Councillor Hawke.
Ai tautoko rawa au i ngā kōrero tō tātene hia mana. Louise, koutou ko te tīma e whakahaere hia nei tēnei ripuata mo te rohe, o te matau a Māui. Tika tonu na whakaaro o Councillor says. He rauemi tēnei, e ahe ana te iwi me ki o te matau a Māui ki te maumahara ki ngā tino mahi uaua pututuki paia i tātou ko te kaunihira o te matau a Māui. So I'm just reiterating the sentiments of the work that's been put in the report, and absolutely it will serve as a reference point for us all. and also a resource. And I'm just congratulating you on the efforts and the team that have been able to arrive at this report. Great read.
Thank you. Councillor Williams.
Yeah, thank you. Again, everything that's been shared. I just hope that all of those ratepayers who say that they don't get anything for their rates will wonder what we do, and told us during our revenue and finance policies that we had too many cars because they could see them in there on the weekends. And you guys are all out there smoking cigarettes and things like that. I mean, for goodness sake, it's not just that you put together the report, it's everything that the report describes. That's the heroic thing about this. It's both dimensions, and there's enough going on in an organisation ordinarily, but have to deal with getting OICs and having to deal with all those community meetings, and having to deal with the flood categorisation, the land categorisation, the silt, the negotiations with the Crown, dealing with our finances, running, all that sort of. It's just extraordinary when you think about it. And I'm reminded of the word overwhelmed that I think Mr. Bush used in his report. It's quite surprising that we weren't completely overwhelmed, and I'm sure we all felt we were at times. But look what you've turned up, so congratulations.
Got it, Councillor Harding.
Kia ora, Chair. A couple of wee points to make. Firstly, never let it be said that the influence of Wairoa is not in this report, because I've counted 3 examples where the staff have used the word exasperated instead of exacerbated. So I thought that's definitely a Councillor Roadley initiative, that one. Look, Tautoko, all those previous comments. It's a fantastic journal, really well put together, of a huge amount of work. Look, but I do need to observe that some communities, in reading those really good summaries, the place-based summaries that include impacts, the one thing that's missing in there is the acknowledgement of loss of life. And I think somewhere we need, it's disrespectful if we don't at some point, if this is a public-facing document, just acknowledge that. So, but thank you.
Thank you. I don't think that was intended, but we do take your point. Thank you. Councillor McIntosh.
Just a similar way of saying the same thing that the others have said, but sorry, a different way of saying the same thing. Imagine if you had said to us on February the 10th or whatever, Nick, if you'd been here, you said to the staff, look guys, we're going to have a flood on Monday, you're going to need to change all your work program, we need 16 pods up running, fixing stop banks, we need X groups getting silt out of orchards and all that sort of thing. The answer would have been, well, there's no way we can do that. It's just not going to happen in the time frame you've proposed. But actually, it did happen. And it's royal we, did get that done. And so I think it is very important to have the record of this, because you do lose it otherwise. And when you look over that record, I'm really proud to be part of an organisation that has brought all that stuff about. We've got a lot of flack, but we've done a hell of a lot in the meantime. So thank you.
Councillor Roadley.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, absolutely. Reiterate what everybody said, minus the barbs about my poor vocab. Louise, what an outstanding piece of work, and I just want to pick up on, Chair, you mentioned the way that the council staff have been asked and have responded to do stuff they would never have anticipated, and possibly hopefully never have to do again in their working lives. But just to acknowledge Susie and Katrina for the huge enabling of those Crown negotiations that you have brought into this mahi, because without that critical piece, Katrina around the silt funding and silt and debris, and obviously Susie, your ongoing work with the Crown to get the moolah, get the putia in the kiti for us. So yeah, thank you so much for that work. And also, I think the balancing of community wellbeing and not just progressing. And I think we heard it with Chris today about the complexities of not just being able to progress things at pace because the government requires us to and because we want to get stuff done, and we have these highly skilled people who can build stuff and can design stuff and can make stuff, but that they are so mindful of our community wellness, their mental wellness, their capacity to engage, their capacity to move at a particular pace, and how complex that is, and it is an art, not a science, and what a huge ongoing piece of work that is, and that we are signalling clearly to our community that whilst Louisa's formal role is being stepped down, and this is the capturing of that phase, that our work is well from done, and actually many of our community are still deeply in this process, and will continue to be for, well, as Councillor Sears said, for, you know, potentially generations to come. We'll still be working through this. So thank you for the capturing of this little moment in time.
Councillor Van Dyk.
Yeah, absolutely endorse what everybody's been saying. And it's been really great. And I'll tell a little story. As a young lad, we had on our coffee table a book. It was about a major flood that happened in Zealand. New Zealand is named after that particular province. And it was about then, I think it's in 1954, when 1,885 people died during a major flood event when the North Sea just walloped our flood bank system. And I hope that from this, we will get something as well. So it will never be forgotten. It will think about. What I would like to see is maybe, it would be really great, it's too late now maybe, but you forget so quickly when you drive around the district what was there when it happened and how it's been tidied up through the work that our staff and our community have done. So a photo library added to it. You know, I love the photos of the satellites where you can actually see there actually was water there, you know. That's why I can see why it's category 2C or 2A or 3. It's really visual. And also what we learned very quickly is that people forget after 7 years, we'll start to make the same mistakes again. And I think this document is a really good document, and so really well done. It's nicely written, it's clear. You can go to your own little section and actually engross yourself in it rather than having to look for it, which I think is really good. And I hope that it will be a document that will be used by the public. I just have one question. And that is assess impacts on air quality. There was some work done, and it was funded by NBIE. Where can I find that assessment of the air quality during the cleanup of the cyclone? Do you know where that is?
No, but I can ask Dr. Kosniak. She was liaising with that, so she will have access to where that is.
That'd be great, thank you. But once again, well done, as has been said before.
Got to round up, yeah. Thanks, team. Look, when we all saw the, stood on stop banks were that keen, or looking down on floodplains and saw all the water, couldn't believe our eyes. It was pretty rough. And then when we first got back to this building, and no one was getting any sleep, and a few of us lost their own homes and property. It was tough on everyone, and there was some, tense times, and I don't think any of us were coping, but you couldn't expect people to anyway. To think about those times and where we've got to today, it's pretty impressive where this organisation's got to. And so to capture that in this document is really awesome. So well done on that. I think for me, the most important thing now and going forward is while we as an organisation feel like we've come through really well, and we have, and we're still strong and probably stronger for it, our people out there are still really suffering. Reality's sunk in for a lot of them. The costs of damage and repair work is hugely significant in a lot of cases, and it's going to be a long haul for many of our community to pick themselves up from this. And so, yeah, we just must never forget that. And and do what we can to help as many of our community out now and for a long time going forward in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Foley, would you like to move?
I have to move, Chair, yeah.
No, I'm happy to. Oh, Councillor Van Beek, happy to second. All those who agree say aye.
Aye.
Those against, carried. Kia ora, thank you, Louise.
I just want to acknowledge Julianne, who held the pen for most of that report and did all the wrangling of all the information from all the teams across council. So I certainly can't take credit for it. It's Julianne's baby. So
Well done, Julianne.
Julianne. Kia ora. Okay, team. We have the discussion of other items on the agenda, and that is you, Councillor Foley, Future Farming Trust.
Oh, cool. So, yeah, just a quick update on Hawke's Bay Future Farming Trust. One of the significant project that's underway at this time, as you're aware, is the Carbon Positive project, which is looking at intensive cropping and what alternative systems or methods can be employed that may have some impact on soil and soil carbon, as well as, less cultivation, less chemical inputs. And so the second crop has just been harvested, which was tomatoes. And so while there's some initial yield results, there's a lot more results still to come. So keep an eye on the website for that. But things such as fruit grading, bricks, dry matter, a lab analysis for nitrogen and carbon, and pesticide residues. So that's all still to come. But the yields, just quickly, were 140 tonne for conventional. And so, remind me if I get this wrong, Zan, I think the average was about 125 is considered a kind of average good crop. Anything above that is good, and below not so good. So 140 tonne for the conventional hybrid. So the hybrid method is not a full alternative regen type. It's just kind of pulling back halfway, a combination of both conventional and regenerative type methods. It was 149 tonne. So it did better than the conventional, but not statistically different. And the regenerative plot did 93 tonne. So still a lot more data and info to come out of that around the methods employed and the costs and inputs and stuff. So just keep an eye on the website for that, but really exciting project to start getting some data like that. The other thing too is we're still trying to set up farming for carbon project, which is under pastoral farming, under livestock grazing. The difficulty there is around funding, and so we've started a new way, I guess, of trying to extract funds from other sources and employing someone in that field that can help us out with that. So hopefully that's successful, and then we can, start some other projects. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Foley. We move on
Can we have
to.
a brief discussion about that?
Oh, no, usually with these items it's informational, so if you can follow up with Will afterwards. Our last item is confirmation of what was public excluded minutes. Now, it's recommended this be a public excluded, but I don't think there is any need to, as the table and the maps are not included in here. So everything that is in these minutes are for public consumption. So I think we should just stay in public right now to move those minutes.
Happy to move on that basis.
Second it.
Happy to second. All those who agree say aye.
Aye.
Those against, carried. Kia ora tātou. And that concludes our day. Thank you all for your contribution, as always, highly valuable. And, a part of this resilience plan also captures the work that we have done as a council and as a team. So thank you all. To close, please join in for our karakia. Kia tau, kia tātou katoa, te a te whai o tō tātou ariki a ihu karaiti, me te aroha o te atua, me te whiwhi ngā tahitanga ki te wairua tapu, ake, āmina, kia ora tātou.